HOA Karen raided my house for toilet paper, disinfectant, and hand sanitizer, posted by a homeowner Phil. This happened over a year ago during the height of the pandemic in mid-2020. I'm a 29-year-old male and a homeowner. I bought a house in 2019 for my uncle because he was well set and wanted to retire to his second home by a lake. Before buying the house, my uncle warned me that the neighborhood has an HOA, but it only affects those who joined it, and my uncle did not. But the price my uncle was offering was half the home's value. I couldn't pass up the offer, so I bought a house in an HOA neighborhood that wasn't part of the HOA. Right after I moved in, I got a knock at the door, and when I opened it, I was greeted by an older woman with short graying blonde hair and a face covered in thick makeup, and was holding a welcome to the neighborhood gift basket. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA, then asked to come in so she could help me fill out some forms. I knew what she was trying to do because my uncle warned me she did this to every new homeowner in the area who wasn't a part of the HOA. So I quickly and bluntly stated that I was not going to join her HOA. Her smile quickly disappeared as she started saying that I did not have a choice as all new homeowners are mandated to join. I told her I knew in advance that was a total lie and that I will not be paying any dues or fines and will be ready to call a lawyer if I have to. She called me a thorn to the neighborhood and said she'd be back, though we did not speak to each other for some time. I expected her to start sending me fines in the mail, but the most I usually got were letters stating that my grass was getting too tall or my driveway needed sweeping. Those never bothered me because they're normal home chores and need to be done regularly anyway. But several neighbors that were on the HOA side made it clear they didn't like me because I didn't join, just like my uncle. I said that was fine. We're neighbors, but we don't have to be friends. They said that was fine too, because I'm an outsider and they'll never accept me until I join the HOA. Later in early 2020, I got word from a friend that people were starting to buy a lot of disinfectant, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer en masse. I decided the best option was to order these things online. I got 8 big 12 packs of toilet paper, a case of 20 bottles of hand sanitizer, 3 boxes of disposable latex gloves, a couple of boxes of disposable face masks, and a case of 20 large cans of brand name disinfectant spray. I set for the delivery to be signed for only as I did not trust anyone not to steal my packages if they were just left on my porch. When the packages were delivered, several neighbors saw me getting lots of toilet paper and some other packages that contained the other stuff. And just because I'm a paranoid guy, I still bought more of the same stuff when I saw it in stores, like those small cheap 4-packs of toilet paper or off-brand disinfectant sprays. I bought them because I had a feeling some friends or family might need some soon. And I was right. As expected, toilet paper, disinfectant, and sanitizer pretty much disappeared from store shelves for miles around, and people were fighting over it and hoarding it. Meanwhile, I've got a very generous supply that I still haven't come close to using up. The word of my supply got around fast when people started needing some. A friend of mine ran out of toilet paper and had no hand sanitizer, so I gave him a couple of the generic 4-packs of TP and a bottle of sanitizer at my door. A few family members ran out too, and I shared with them as well. They were all extremely grateful. But I ended up with several neighbors knocking on my door and asking to buy my supply or wanting handouts. But I refused and said I only gave some of what I had away to friends and family. And they made it pretty clear to me before that we'd never be friends since I refused to join their HOA. So, if I were to give some to one neighbor, they'd all want my supplies, and then I'd run out, well, really fast. They didn't like this and harassed me several times from the sidewalk, but I just ignored them. Later, the HOA Karen showed up at my door and told me several neighbors had run out of all the items that this post is about. Then said she wasn't asking, but demanding that I share my stock with my neighbors to set a good example. I told her to buzz off because that had nothing to do with me. I may be a jerk, but I'm a well-prepared jerk, and I've read her HOA bylaws online. So, even if I was a member of her HOA, which I was not, I wouldn't have to give up my stock either way. She left while yelling at me that one day I'd regret not being a good neighbor or being a part of her HOA. The next time I went to work, I was notified around noon by the cameras I had at my house that there was a thief breaking into my home. I could see video of them on my smartphone, and it looked like a woman in a spandex suit with her face covered by a hockey mask. I called the police immediately and was allowed to clock out at work so I could rush home. Right around the time I got there, the cops were walking HOA Karen out in handcuffs to a police cruiser. She'd broken into my home by using a crowbar to force open the back door and was tossing all of my toilet paper and any other supplies she could grab out into my backyard, where her kids were picking it up and bagging it. I pressed charges, and HOA Karen got 6 months in jail and probation. HOA Karen's husband called me to apologize for his wife and told me that he had been planning a divorce for a while because this isn't the first time she'd been in trouble with the law, and CPS got involved too because she was using her kids to help steal from me. So he was going to file for full custody in the divorce. HOA Karen didn't return, and someone new was elected HOA president in her place. Her husband didn't move, and I see him from time to time. And there's no hard feelings between us. And yes, he did get full custody of his kids because his wife had a longer history with the law than I thought. We're sort of friends now too, as we've occasionally had a beer together and he helped me replace my back door that his ex broke. I'm making this post more than a year later because I just saw HOA Karen again. I was visiting some friends in another city and saw her working at the local supermarket there bagging groceries. As soon as we saw each other, she obviously recognized me because she scowled and refused to look at me again the entire time I was there. Karma is a real witch, isn't it, Karen? Forced me to get rid of my pet bunny. Enjoy the bunny-ocalypse, posted by NorCal HOA Alliance. This was actually my neighbor's revenge. When I was 9, a new neighbor moved in across the street. They had a 9-year-old girl who had 2 pet bunnies. I became fast friends with the new neighbor, and several of the neighborhood kids would regularly come by her house to play with the bunnies. For 2 years, everything was fine. No one had any issues, and we all lived happily in our white picket fence neighborhood. Enter HOA Hole, referred to as Karen from here on out. Now, Karen lived on the other side of the new neighbors. Our HOA was fairly reasonable. Don't paint your house neon pink, cut your grass, otherwise you're safe. But Karen was high-ranking on the board and had a tendency to nitpick about stupid things. After 2 years, Karen had gotten bored and decided it was a problem that new neighbors had bunnies. Why? Well, because deep in our HOA bylaws, it states that you cannot have any non-domesticated pets. Bunnies, even though theirs had never been left outside or hurt any of the kids, were considered non-domesticated. Karen made a stink to the board and insisted that something be done immediately. HOA sends a letter that the bunnies get gone ASAP or fines would start accumulating. New neighbor tried to go talk to Karen and explained that they're his daughter's pets, they're harmless and so on, and Karen wanted none of it. She smirked and told his daughter to tell bugs bye-bye. What Karen didn't know is that new neighbors were only a few weeks away from moving back across the country to be closer to family. They'd done a private sale on the house, no signage outside, and most people didn't even know. New neighbor could have just ignored the letter and he would have been gone before the fees could hit. But no, that would be too easy. What did he do instead? He drove to a friend's property in a rural area of town, captured 4 wild bunnies, and set them loose in the neighborhood the day before he moved. And boy did those bunnies do what bunnies do. And where did they do it? where he and his wife had spent years creating a bushy, flowery oasis. Within a month or two, the bunny population doubled, a few more, and it tripled. Within a few months, our neighborhood was overrun. For the most part, they were harmless, stayed out of the way, and added a homey feel to our yards. For Karen, it was havoc on his beautiful yard, and he spent months petitioning that the HOA eradicate them, to no avail. 20 years later, and the neighborhood is still a bunny hideaway. Karen still lives there and has long given up on protecting his beautiful backyard from the bunnies. All because he wouldn't leave a 9-year-old girl's pet bunnies alone. Ridiculous HOA storytime in The Fence is Wider on the Other Side, posted by Helpful Candidate 92. This story is something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to, it was a commercial apartment and condo place with an HOA. To paint the picture, this place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that led to a parking lot, some of which my mother noticed has fences. My mother handled mostly all of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quick that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guidelines, she finds a contractor, which she discovered was an old childhood friend, surprise, and has the fence put in. Cue the HOA. My mom submits the contractor's document stating the kind of fence and color and specs, only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning, the technical term for the color white of the fence doesn't match what they allow. Best example would be they allow paper white, but it was labeled eggshell. They stated that they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get to the other white, you had to use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved, to say the least. She went as far to take pictures of all the fences, hers included, and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't, but still didn't care. The paperwork didn't match. Thankfully, she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence, and the HOA watch as it's taken away in a day. The next day, the same fence comes back and gets put in again, and this time the paperwork says paper white. It's been years and my mother still has the same fence. The HOA never said anything farther. Those fees were never paid, but it's fine. My mom doesn't use the pool anyway. Should have just told the HOA the original paperwork had a mistake and said it was paper white. And then they take you to court, put a lien on your house, and forcibly foreclose it on you. HOAs are dangerous. Don't want to move your car for one day? Lose your convenient parking spot for a year. Posted by Rashmisavi. This happened on the last 26th of January, and today the malicious compliance was done, not by me, but the committee of the society where I live. This drama conveniently happened in front of my window. In my city, the residential complexes are managed by housing societies, much like the HOA system in the USA, just not as horrible. Each society has their own committee to manage day-to-day affairs. Also, as my society has much more parking spaces than it has cars, it has no designated parking spots allotted to the residents. Anyone can park their vehicle wherever they want, but it must be a marked parking spot. People mostly just park their cars in the same parking spot just because of convenience and habit. Everyone mostly respects each other's spot, and I have never seen any confrontations happening because of the parking. So, those of you who don't know, 26th of January is the Republic Day of India, and all over the country, the day is celebrated by flag hoisting ceremony in the morning. The flagpole of our society, where the flag hoisting ceremony will be held, is just in front of the main gate of the society. There are 2 parking spaces just under the flagpole. All other parkings are further away from the main gate, and you have to walk some distance to reach there from the main gate. The thing to note is that these 2 parking spots are very, very convenient for all the flats which are facing this flagpole. However, out of respect, people have left one of the parking for one elderly person whose flat faces a flagpole, and the other spot is taken up by an annoying kind of person who never moves his car from this place, else someone will steal his spot. If this person wants to get into his car, he just has to walk a dozen feet from his front door. On the evening of the 25th of January, the committee members asked this person to move his car for a day so that the decorations and other arrangements for the next day's flag hoisting can be made. Someone had already moved the car of the elderly person. However, the annoying guy was too frustrated about moving the car and first argued a lot with the committee people, saying that there is no such rule in society rulebook that someone has to move their car for any kind of festivities, and if you want to move his car, you have to write a rule in the rulebook. After a lot of arguments and interference of other people, he finally moved his car. The decorations were done in the night, and the next day, a small but beautiful ceremony was held. And in the evening of the 26th, everyone in the society received a message that there was an emergency meeting of the committee. The rulebook had been amended, and it has been decided that those 2 parking spots have to be converted into one, and anyone who wants to park in that one spot has to take prior permission from the society committee. As expected, only 2 people applied for that parking spot, the elderly person and the annoying guy. And today, the committee unanimously decided that the elderly person is in much more need of that convenient parking spot because of his age, and that spot has been allotted to him for 1 year. Now, the annoying guy has to park his car far from his front door for at least a year, pretty sure that he's not going to get the spot next year too. He is not going to like this more in the coming rainy season, as we live in Mumbai, which is notorious for its horrible monsoon rains each year. All of this just because he didn't want to move his car for 1 day. Man-child of a neighbor, posted by Smeximus with an update. Backstory: 22-year-old male, moved into the new house my mother bought and living by myself while we deal with the old house. I'm taking care of all the bills. Started having issues when the neighbor who rents the upstairs of the house next to mine came pounding on the door, saying that I was parked too close to him on the street and I needed to move. By the time I came outside, he had moved his car and proceeded to yell insults at me and then threaten me with retaliation from a notorious biker gang. I reported it to the police so that there would be a file on it. In the year that I've lived here, not once has anyone in the area shown any signs of biker affiliation, so I think he's lying. A couple of weeks later, I had a few friends over to catch up, and one had to slightly park on the street in front of his house. But street parking is first come, first serve. When my friend left, he found his windshield wiper ripped off and sticky stuff smeared on his windows. We don't have proof that my neighbor did it, but I have a pretty good feeling he did. Since then, whenever I'm outside, he will just stare me down and make me feel uncomfortable to be in my home. I've set up a temporary security camera watching the street in front of my house in case anything happens, with plans to set up a permanent system shortly. I just feel constantly nervous that he's going to do something else whenever I'm home. Any suggestions would be appreciated. The update: my neighbor is back at it again with his crap. While working in my backyard, and can pretty consistently look over and see him staring at me from behind the screen door of his house. The across the street neighbor had company who parked in front of his house, so he proceeded to park in front of their house despite there being lots of space in front to still park. I had to park about a foot over in front of his house because of cars in front of mine, and the next morning, after they were gone, he moved his vehicle directly in front of my house as some sort of power move, I guess. Tonight, which is causing me to post this update, he has company over that has parked directly in front of my house, again, despite plenty of room in front of their house to park. Normally, this wouldn't bother me, as street parking is fair game, but not when this butt acts like a child if anyone else does it. So again, I'm ranting but also looking for advice. I'm still looking into a permanent camera system to install, recommendations are welcome, and since my first post, I've also found out the landlord's information. Would you contact them to let them know what's going on? I just feel at a loss. Commenter says, and OP answers, park right behind them and in front so they can't get out. Pretend that you lost both sets of keys for about 3 hours. OP says, this is something that he likes to do. I've looked into my city's bylaws and you can't park closer than 600 millimeters to another vehicle. Yeah, OP, I wonder what would happen if you did talk to the landlord about this and escalate this issue. Good luck. Neighbor uses side entrance, which opens to our yard, for the landscaper to cut their grass. Hi, not sure if this is the right subreddit. My husband and I just bought a house in an HOA gated community with about 60 single-family homes sitting on about 0.15 acres each. The HOA was formed in around 2019, but they've only just started to enforce rules. We have this rule that fences need to be set off 2 feet from the property line. Our neighbors to the left have a fence that is set off 1 foot from the property line. They've been grandfathered in, but they have a side gate that opens inward to their property. The previous owners of our home didn't have any landscaping, so the communal landscaper would mow our lawn and then use our lawn to enter the neighbor's lawn through the side gate. We decided to plant some trees to mark our property line. We made sure to leave a gap in the trees for the gate, though my neighbor had said it's defunct and doesn't really open. Now that we have trees lining our property, since we didn't want to build a fence because it was going to have to be 2 foot set back, which seemed kind of silly, we mulched them. But now, the landscaper is saying it's too much of a pain to weed whack around them, so he would prefer 1 solid bed. Okay, we will do a solid, but we want to put edging in. Our neighbor saw my husband put edging in, which, by the way, is not easy considering we're in South Carolina and there's tough clay soil. She politely said, "Please make sure to not edge by where the gate is so the landscaper can ride in on his mower." Are we right to be annoyed that we have to adjust our landscaping in order to accommodate the mower? Should we talk to the ARB, the board? We want to be good neighbors and we also want our property to look good. Any advice is greatly appreciated. And answer, do you have a copy of the community rules? Where I live, we have a specific rule telling residents they cannot add or do things to impede the landscapers. Do you have an architecture committee? Have you talked to your management company? And OP replies, we don't have a management company. We have volunteers that make up each committee and the board. I don't think I have the latest copy of the community rules because they haven't been approved yet. It's so lackadaisical here. But the ARB said nothing about mulching and edging. That's just been our landscaper's comments. It sucks that we have to sacrifice our landscaping in order to help our neighbor have a riding mower get in there. Wondering if the landscaper can use a smaller mower specifically for their plot. Yeah, you could definitely raise the question and concern here, just be very careful when you do, OP, if you decide to. HOA lawsuit. We take the HOA to court over this, but we aren't even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you get the fallout of this crazy story. You don't want to miss it, and I'll see you there.